Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Sophia, and I'm going to be your host. I'm really excited to present the topic and our speakers, Catherine Grace Nance and Drew Winchowski. So Catherine is a front-end developer, a UX designer, an author, a speaker, and a serious senior design and developer advocate with the Progress Developer Tools team, where she helps people build beautiful and user-friendly interfaces. Drew is a data architect. He is an expert in data management and knowledge management, and he's also our MarkLogic and Semaphore specialist here at the Progress Data Platform team. And together, we're going to be talking about how to deliver enterprise applications today much faster with Progress tools. All right, so let's dive into it. Custom software is back in fashion, and that is all thanks to AI. AI-assisted coding has encouraged organizations to build custom tools and workflows where needs are really unique. And that typically means supporting unique data, supporting unique business requirements, and most importantly, supporting your enterprise's unique competitive edge. And IT teams are typically feeling the pressure to deliver those enterprise applications with AI-assisted coding much faster. But the thing is that AI-assisted coding is not everything. It's a great productivity booster, but it still needs guardrails. So we're going to need the people and we're going to need the tools to put those guardrails in place so that AI written code can be incorporated into larger projects that go into production. And so I really like that finding from a recent report done by the Progress Developer Tools team that says that teams are planning for hybrid skills and governance. And so we're going to talk about how to hit that balance between speed and governance for your competitive edge while using Progress products. So where do we start, right? Internally at Progress, we started by combining our expertise across data management and UI development so that your team can actually deliver those production-grade React applications on your information without stitching tools together or without building custom UI components from scratch. So we teamed up with the Progress KendoReact team, and for those of you who are not familiar with KendoReact, it is an award-winning UI component library with over 120 pre-built UI components. And so my first question then is going to be for Catherine. And if you could please give us like a little intro to KendoReact, but most importantly, what are the aspects of the component library that developers appreciate the most?
Yeah, absolutely. You gave a great high-level overview, right? It is a collection of UI controls that's built for React. We also have versions available for Vue and Angular and jQuery, as well as Blazor and .NET, if that's something that you're interested in. But I mostly work with the React ones, and I'll admit those are my favorite. So there's all sorts of components that you can pull from here. We like to think of it as kind of putting together Legos, right, to build a full interface. So everything from buttons and switches and tabs and modals to really complex things like the data grid or our charts and other sorts of visualization tools to really build out everything you could need for the UI of your application. I believe the second thing you asked, right, was what developers like about it the most. And probably the simple answer to that is just speed, right? A lot of developers are most interested in focusing on the business logic, right? I mean, at the end of the day, an application is just a way for users to accomplish a goal, and the user interface is just the way that they interact with it. So the quicker we can kind of put that together in a way that's going to make it as simple as possible for users to achieve those goals, the better it is for developers who can really focus their energy on the hard questions and the kind of product market fit and the ultimate logic of putting the application together.
Okay, so speed.
Speed.
Right. So, Drew, you have developed a lot of applications using the combined power of MarkLogic and MarkLogic FastTrack specifically, and then the KendoReact toolkit. My question to you is, what kind of applications and what kind of use cases are benefiting the most from using the two together?
Yeah, so it's really interesting with MarkLogic and the data platform is that our customers typically look at data in context as well as multiple forms of data. We really focus in on complex workflows where there's multi-model data, whether it's assets coming from data feeds like JSON or XML, binary files like PDFs and Word docs that may have your enterprise knowledge within those assets, as well as content coming from relational stores. And all this information really is hard to present to a user in traditional tools like BI systems or regular web apps, right? So it's a lot of complex interactions where assets need to work with each other, show that information, as I said, in context where you may understand the references or maybe the classification system that that piece of content is associated with. And that's typically difficult to do from scratch, right? So what's awesome about the Kendo products as well as FastTrack is that leveraging Kendo, I can build a really interactive web application from the component library that includes things like the whole page wrappers, navigation flows, buttons and interactions. And then with the fast track component, we understand how to speak to the data platform and pull that information right into the UI without having to do a lot of complex coding. It also gives you separations of concerns from your data experts and your UI developers. So you can start to build really interactive applications without having to understand all the data underneath the hood, right? I can show a couple of different applications here that we've built out. The first one is our research portal. So if I log in as a researcher, I can come in and see quick navigations, a search bar that I can interact with, and the whole page wrapper, right? So if I come in and say search for glucose, I can see articles coming up right away from the underlying data store. We have information and quick aggregations for faceting. We can drill down. Again, other components start to interact with each other. We have the full text of the articles in relevancy order. And then we even have a integration with our knowledge graph where we can interpret the end user's question and look up helpful information. As Catherine was saying, modals popping up those assets to see them in more detail, tabbing through them for calling things like recommendations, or even seeing the assets in its knowledge where it sits in the knowledge graph. This is all interesting in terms of interactions where a user can come in and start to read more about this specific area that they're interested in. But if you're like a analyst, you may want to just look for high-level roll-ups and analytics, right? Without having to fire up a heavy BI tool like those that are available in the market and those thick clients, I can pull in predefined dashboards within my UI here as well. We can start to interact with them and see like what's our sprawl of content. And even now with chatbots, we can interact with the system with native AI functionality to start to ask questions like, what is the effect? Glucose, take GLP-1 medications. So we can start to interact with the AI agents and interpret the question, pull the most relevant content from the database and have citational links back to it, right? So it's actually pretty powerful in terms of building research applications, right? So this is typically what we see in our scientific publishers or R&D organizations that we support, where they're doing like deep research or knowledge management. Here's another application that was built in with the framework, but looks quite different, right? This is a content supply chain application where we have multimedia content, news articles, dashboards, more of a back office syndication portal where we can track content and news coming through our systems, search for them in a multimedia, and they're supporting multimedia, pull in the classification systems and use things like tree views to facet down within the content, as well as having our citational facets. But could we even start to pull in more complex things like geospatial information and have these widgets interact with each other? Um, so I can like only look for articles that may be taking place in France, for example, and see how they're interconnected with each other. So a lot of interesting information. And as I was highlighting earlier, being having the supporting multimedia with them and the classification system. So we see all things like uh, pill navigations, modals for assets, pulling through the system, geospatial coordinations, even things like building advanced forms. Like this is a syndication portal aspect where we have complex filtering on top of the data to interact with the system and then present it out in different feed formats, whether it's an HTML representation or RSS, for example. We can start to really build interactive applications with the tooling. Uh, and as we highlighted, right, the interesting thing here is speed. We can just go in and start to either pull components that we know we want to use from the library, or even using like an AI coding assistant. I've been using Claude quite a bit to build some of these demos, right? And just specifying the types of navigation and design principles I want to follow for my applications, and having it scaffold things out where I can go in and make modifications.
Amazing. So you showed a view with charts, a couple of different styles of charts. And if I'm not mistaken, those are UI components from the KendoReact library, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so Kat, in our case, we typically, work with billions of records of information, and performance can be like a very important aspect of that. Can you tell us a little bit more about maybe the KendoReact grid and how it handles information in large quantities?
Yeah, so that's one of the biggest things that our customers look for from us is the ability to put tons and tons and tons of records into this grid and still have it stand up. So we have spent a lot of time on performance. If you want, there's even kind of test benchmarks that we run comparing us against some popular competitors. We've put that on the blog, I think fairly recently, maybe just a month or two ago. So you can look those up and honestly like see the grids and the breakdowns of like what the time was in milliseconds of how fast it was to load the grid. We also, on the React side, have our grid working with server components as well. So there is a server component version of our grid. So if you want that kind of advanced performance and you guys are working with SSR and you want to leverage that to speed up your performance and your loading, that's an option that's available to you as well.
Awesome. We're going to make sure to include that, a link to that blog and that benchmark in our follow-up. Drew, back to you. How long did it take you, comparatively, to build that application compared to whatever you've done in the past with like similar component or like just similar approaches?
Yeah. So the interesting thing here, I'm going to say days to weeks to build the initial prototypes and then iterate on them as new ideas pop up. What the interesting thing here is in the time savings too. Before you'd have to go and hunt and peck over the web, like what React component I want to use for a grid or what I want to use for visualization. And it's a really piecemeal approach to going and finding things. And then you have to worry about compatibility and like, can we run these, widgets together? Do we have to be on a specific version of React, or is there a underlying dependency that's not compatible with each other? Uh, that's like the tough part of UI design and UI development, right? Where um, you're just like going through the weeds trying to make things work. What's nice here is that we have everything predefined for us where we can go to that library and pull the widget that we need with and understand that it's compatible, right, with the other widget sets in the library. And then also the aspect too with the FastTrack components being able to speak to the data platform, right? Having that set of interactions is really saves a lot of time when you have to code up API requests or advanced filtering and deterministic ways to find the content in the data platform. That gets pretty complicated as well, right? And you have to write that over and over again for each application that you want to develop. So having this managed at the core with the what it's called the MarkLogic context within the FastTrack library is really beneficial. So it really does allow you to really just focus in on the UI components and the kind of user experience with some easy to use function calls to pull the data.
Okay, I want to kind of like circle back to that productivity aspect of the components working together with the MarkLogic data functionality. Catherine, can you tell us a little bit about what the team at KendoReact is doing to like take this productivity even further these days?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned, Drew, that you've been working with Claude a lot recently and that that's kind of become a part of your regular development workflow, and you're definitely not the only one. All of our clients are, and we definitely are as well as developers and advocates over on the Kendo team. So we have been kind of starting to shift our components to work and play nicely with AI, whether that is on the user end with kind of smart components that offer your users new ways to kind of interact with the data or with the component itself, or in terms of with your development environment. So something that you can integrate. Our UI generator plays very well with Copilot and integrates right into VS Code. So you can ask it questions and have it create Kendo layouts and components for you right in the place where you're already working. So we're kind of looking at it from two angles, making sure that not only can your users reap the benefits of this new technology, but you as a developer can as well.
It's really interesting in the interactions with Claude and understanding how to pull from that Kendo library.
Mm-hmm.
I can walk through a few of the code snippets to show exactly how that interaction was built out that you saw in that research application. So we're looking at a React application here written in TypeScript, and it all starts with this MarkLogic provider, and we pull things from configuration properties to know what host to connect with and what port, as well as some pagination options for default. We also wrap the application as pagination provider so we can do some caching of results and understand how we can quickly load applications through that cache. So once you have this provider present, you'll have the ability to use what we call the MarkLogic context. And this context, as set up here, is just is part of the FastTrack application that allows you to start making queries to the system. In this case, this handle search function, when I typed in the word glucose into my toolbar there, it sets the navigation like you would typically do in any React application, but also sets the query parameter for the query text in our workflow. So as this is executed, we see the request going to the system, and the MarkLogic search executes. So this is what we're getting back from the server. We understand that the question at hand came through. We sent to the middle tier to connect to the MarkLogic server and start to pull in this JSON payload. So we have our results. We have extracted matches, as well as the metadata that we could use to contextualize the articles. But we can also see facets, right? Quick aggregations across all of our content. So this is how we build those facets and navigations, as well as some of the data grids that we're showing and visualizations that we were showing earlier. So looking at the search itself, we have our MarkLogic context here. And adding a facet and interacting through UI is as easy as saying context that adds string facet constraint, right? With the selection that user selected in the UI. We could also see here even rendering them out, right? We just need to drop in the component itself, give it a title, and point to that area in the search response that the content was found in. So it's pretty easy to just add those things directly into the UI, as well as in here, the rendering those results with the pagination, showing the headers and footer pagination, how we want to show it as a small or a large size for the paging of the results. And then even if I want to render a custom view, I can come in here and start to render custom layouts for those individual results on there, things like showing the authors and the citations and all that. So it's really fast to build those types of applications. As I said, like we prompted Claude a little bit to help out here in certain areas that we wanted to relay out or add in additional functionality into the applications. So being able to just pull from this library of components is really interesting and kind of fast track, so pun intended, all your development.
Right. I've always also thought that the combination of the KendoReact components, the search facets, and the diversity of the data that you can pull from MarkLogic is kind of like the holy grail of what the two teams have managed to do together. To kind of like automate that process for developers, or not automate it, but at least make it like much easier. When I was looking at your application, Drew, it looked pretty nice. I have to say, it also looked very much on brand with a Progress style. So I know that that's a large part. Thanks to a large part thanks to the components in KendoReact and how they're designed, and also some additional tools that are available. So, question to Catherine: what is the team over at Progress Developer Tools actually doing to help developers deliver applications that look good but are also on brand?
Yeah, so the biggest thing here is the ThemeBuilder product, which I can share for you right now. Give me just a sec. Yeah, back to when you were talking earlier, Drew, about some of the downsides of using all these various component libraries kind of put together, right? Is that you have all these components that are styled in different ways that need different overrides. It's really hard to kind of go through and have one consistent style, one look and feel across the entirety of your application. And your users will notice when the interaction pattern for one component is different to another. So as much as we can kind of consolidate that and make it a really consistent experience for them, and to get that kind of professional branding and look and feel on top, I mean, that's really what we want. So to that end, we have created this product called the Progress Theme Builder, which allows you to come in and get kind of a live preview and an editing playground for all of these UI controls. So you can come in and see how they all work, test them all out, make sure everything's looking exactly the way you wanted. And then without having to write any CSS at all, you can come in and start making changes. And the way these are structured, the changes that you make to the smaller components will kind of echo across the larger ones as well, because we use, of course, our own components in the bigger components. So anything that uses a button, for example, like we can see in our color picker, we use our buttons down here. We changed the main color of our button, and we see that applied all the way through our entire component library here. And if we want to get in and make really specific changes, we can go into the advanced edit mode. And there we have the option to either go in and write CSS or use the kind of drop-down menus here to make very specific changes to just this component. So we could change the text or the padding or the color of just this component and see that reflected as well. This is really nice because it kind of creates a single source of truth where designers and developers can collaborate. So whether you have designers that want to kind of import their tokens from Figma and apply them here and then make changes using just the WYSIWYG layout, or you have developers that want to come in, write specific CSS, and then export all of this, and it comes out as either one consolidated CSS file or SAS files with the variables depending on how you prefer to work. But it's a good place for everyone to kind of meet in the middle. We think of it as a kind of bridge between the design and development side of things.
And I have to jump in here and say that we have recently added ThemeBuilder to the Progress MarkLogic FastTrack package. Mm-hmm. So when you get MarkLogic FastTrack, you also get the full KendoReact Enterprise license as well as ThemeBuilder in the same package. So you can do all that great stuff that we talked about. I will also like to share the different ways you can get started with all that great stuff. So you could try KendoReact for free today. You get a 30-day trial of all the components and full technical support, or you can get a full demo from our team, or even start a pilot with the technical team. That was a quick segue. I would now like to take you back to the initial topic that we started with, and that's AI-assisted coding. I'm sure that's the question everyone wants an answer to, since everyone's kind of like vibe coding today. So I wanted to ask each of you about what do you think about it? What's your experience? But also for Catherine specifically, I wanted to ask, what are you guys seeing in the community? Because I think you have a very, very large developer community, and you also interview people and like not just like a larger developer community. So I'm really interested in what are people doing? What are you seeing? Is it all hype? Is it working?
I mean, I would say the answer, we're seeing a really wide array of adoption, right? Is that some folks that are working kind of on their side projects, they're at smaller startups, are able to totally lean into that vibe coding experience and really embrace it. And some folks are truly just, it's part of their daily driver now, and they can't imagine going back. But we are also seeing some kind of limited adoption as well, more on the enterprise side, where folks have some more regulations to deal with, or there's more kind of security policies around what they can and can't use and what they're allowed to kind of expose their code to. So we really try to kind of meet people where they're at in terms of like, if you want to use the AI assistant, you can just kind of ask it questions about Kendo syntax and components and what would be the best way to configure this. And it can give you examples, and it can kind of help summarize the documentation for you and just make it really easy to get started without ever having to actually show it your code. Or you can truly lean into the vibe coding side of things and let the UI generator handle all of it for you. ThemeBuilder actually has an AI theme generator in it as well. So you can, in natural language, kind of describe the kind of theme that you want, the vibe, the style, and it can take a swing at styling all the components for you. And then you can just export that code and drop it in. So we know everyone's still kind of feeling this out. I personally am a little bit more on the tentative side. I like to ask rather than let it edit all my files for me. But yeah, kind of, I like to think that we're ready to kind of step in where you're comfortable.
Okay. Drew, as
Yeah.
somebody on the more enterprise side of things, what's been your experience?
Yeah. So I see more on the AI assisted workflows than just flat out vibe coding, right? So you have an idea. You may have, as Kat said earlier, a designer that had a Figma file that went through ThemeBuilder, and you have a starting point. And you also know the type of applications that you're developing um, from the get-go. So I see it a lot more in implementing specific functionality, and that's how I've been using it as well. Is that I'll set up a scaffold that I know works for my type of project, and then go in and say, okay, I'm specifically looking to add the search component to this, right? So here's my project on the MarkLogic side, which is kind of interesting, is that I have my search options defined as part of the configuration that's deployed to the data platform. And then being in the same repo, that we can look at those configurations and then generate that facet configuration in the React side of things, or go in and start to because we support schemas on the data, and like JSON schema or XML schema, read those schemas and then kind of define the output of what's gonna the the full article view is going to look like, or some of the metadata that we want to show on the search components, right? So that those areas have been greatly accelerated than having to just split screen and type in everything, right, from scratch. The other aspect too is that being a secured platform, everything is going through an auth layer here, so you're not interacting with that data um, in a way that can compromise the application, so, or your enterprise, right? So we have things like SSO that we implement, username and passwords in certain cases, but the applications go through that auth flow, so the data that gets displayed in those UIs are always tied to your role in the organization as well. So really interesting to see how that's been playing out as well, right? So some of these views become adaptive based off of the user that you're logged in with as well.
Right. Thank you. So security first.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
And that's exactly what we've tried to implement while combining the components and the MarkLogic functionality as well. Okay, this has been a really, really insightful conversation. I hope it's been insightful for our audience as well. Please leave your comments in the chat, and we're going to make sure we answer all of them. We're also going to follow up with all the great resources that were mentioned during this session. And if you have more serious questions, or if you want to get a demo of the components, or you actually want to see what you can build with the combination of MarkLogic and KendoReact, let us know, contact us, and we'd be happy to follow up. Thank you so much to Drew and Catherine for being our speakers today. Thank you for being with us, and I hope to see you at the next one.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.